The story begins with a young girl named Yoon Ju-won, an orphan who lost her mother at birth and was raised solely by her father. Despite being teased for not having a mother, Ju-won remains a cheerful and positive child. She doesn't dwell on the words of others and always strives to be happy. Like any child, Ju-won has a wish. She longs for an older brother. However, since her father became a widower, he has never remarried, making her wish seem nearly impossible to fulfill. One day, a new family moved into the apartment complex where Ju-won lived. Among them was a boy around her age. Seeing this, Ju-won's father, Mr. Yoon, came up with an idea. He encouraged Ju-won to befriend the boy and think of him as an older brother. The boy's name was Kim Sanha. However, unlike Ju-won, Sanha always appeared gloomy. Ju-won's family soon discovered the reason behind Sanha's sadness. His family was troubled, plagued by constant conflict. His parents frequently argued, especially in the middle of the night. His mother, Miss Kwon, was temperamental and highly sensitive, particularly towards Sanha. The root of their struggles stemmed from a tragic incident, the passing of Sanha's younger sister. The tragedy occurred when Sanha and his sister were left home alone. His father, Mr. Kim, a police officer, was away on duty, and his mother had left for several days for work. Unfortunately, she had unknowingly locked the house from the outside. When his sister passed away, Miss Kwon blamed Sanha, accusing him of failing to protect his sibling without knowing the full truth. At the time, Sanha was still very young, and he chose to remain silent rather than reveal what really happened. He didn't want to cause his mother even more pain. The truth, however, was that the tragedy resulted from Miss Kwon's own negligence. Sanha's father, Mr. Kim, being more understanding, always defended him, but this only fueled the arguments between his parents. Their frequent quarrels became well known among the neighbors, including Ju-won and her father. Witnessing this, Mr. Yoon advised Ju-won to befriend Sanha and invite him over for meals. It became clear that Sanha often resorted to eating raw instant noodles because Miss Kwon refused to cook for him, a testament to the deep resentment she harbored toward him. Though Sanha was initially withdrawn, Ju-won's bright and positive nature gradually encouraged him to open up. As they spent more time together, they shared stories about their families and grew closer. Amid their growing friendship, another boy named Kong Hae-jun entered the picture, along with his mother, Miss Kong. It was revealed that Hae-jun's mother visited Ju-won's home to introduce herself because Mr. Yoon had begun considering remarriage. He hoped to provide Ju-won with a motherly figure and fulfill her wish of having an older brother. However, Ju-won was not pleased with this idea. She didn't want her mother's place to be taken by another woman and preferred that Sanha be the one to become her older brother. Despite Ju-won's reluctance, the meeting between her father and Hae-jun's mother went well. They shared a meal together to get to know each other better, and Miss Kong seemed to develop a fondness for Mr. Yoon, admiring him for being a devoted and responsible parent. A few weeks after that fateful meeting, Miss Kong suddenly disappeared without a word. Just as Mr. Yoon was beginning to move on, he suddenly received a call from Miss Kong, asking to borrow money. With a kind heart, Mr. Yoon lent her the money and traveled to Seoul, only to discover that he was actually there to pick up Hae-jun, who had been staying at his aunt's house. It turned out that Miss Kong was struggling with debt and desperately trying to find a way to earn money. She had left Hae-jun with his aunt, who was too busy with work to properly care for him. Seeing Hae-jun neglected and his aunt's home in disarray, Mr. Yoon offered to take care of him until his mother returned. With genuine sincerity, Mr. Yoon took Hae-jun in and cared for him as if he were his own child. He even encouraged Hae-jun to call him father. At first, Ju-won was displeased with Hae-jun's presence, but over time, they grew close and eventually became good friends, along with Sanha. However, Sanha's happiness only deepened Miss Kwon's resentment. She was still drowning in grief over the loss of her daughter and continued to blame Sanha for the tragedy. Her sorrow and anger often led to arguments with her husband until she ultimately decided to divorce him, leaving Sanha in Mr. Kim's care. Years passed, and by the time Sanha, Juwon, and Haejun reached high school, their families had grown even closer. They often shared meals and helped one another through life's hardships, forming a bond that was as strong as family. However, Juwon had always harbored a desire to make Sanha a true member of her family. She was so determined that she even urged her father to adopt Mr. Kim as his own son, so that they could at least share the same surname and be officially recognized as family. However, Mr. Yoon immediately refused, pointing out that he and Mr. Kim were only a few years apart in age, making the idea impractical. Throughout their school years, Juwon, Sanha, and Haejun attended the same high school. Sanha, with his handsome looks and intelligence, attracted the admiration of many female students. Haejun was just as popular, known for his good looks and his role on the school basketball team. As their younger sister figure, Juwon often found herself acting as the middleman between them and their admirers. She was frequently asked to deliver love letters to Sanha and Haejun, a task she found increasingly uncomfortable, especially when the senders pressured her for their responses. Some even accused Juwon of harboring romantic feelings for her two brothers. In truth, Sanha and Haejun simply had no interest in responding to those confessions. They were cautious about choosing their partners and did not want to engage in fleeting relationships. However, because Juwon had a different surname, people began to speculate, realizing that despite their closeness and the way they called each other siblings, they were not actually related by blood. Frustrated by the rumors and accusations, Juwon confided in Haejun, who jokingly suggested that she adopt an intimidating persona, like the school delinquents, to keep people at bay. While the suggestion was childish, Sanha quickly intervened, concerned that such behavior would only make things more complicated. Sanha, with his more thoughtful personality compared to Haejun, advised Juwon to involve a teacher if the situation became overwhelming. He wanted to ensure that Juwon handled the issue properly without making things worse. Despite this, an unfortunate incident occurred. At school, Juwon was once again pressured to deliver love letters to Haejun and Sanha. To avoid further complications, she came up with an idea to draft a written agreement. The agreement stated that the senders could no longer ask her about the status of their letters and that they would have to approach Haejun or Sanha directly. However, the two girls who had given her the letters misunderstood her intentions, thinking that Juwon was deliberately obstructing them and refusing to help. Juwon's worst fears came true. She became a target of bullying, but she remembered Haejun's advice. Determined to stand up for herself, she attempted to retaliate by dragging one of the girls into the school pool as an act of defiance. Unfortunately, she lost her footing and ended up falling into the water herself. The commotion quickly drew the attention of Sanha and her close friend Park Dao, who then informed Haejun about what was happening. In response, both of them rushed over to protect Juwon, and upon seeing them, the two bullies immediately fled. To Sanha and Haejun, Juwon was their beloved younger sister. While Juwon and Haejun often behaved like typical teenagers, Sanha took on the role of the responsible and mature guardian, always looking out for them. In their neighborhood, they were known as siblings by bond rather than by blood. Some people pitted them for growing up without a mother figure, but Juwon never dwelled on it. She believed that every family had its own unique strengths and was not something to be pitted. One day, a new problem arose when Sanha received a phone call from his maternal grandmother. The news worried everyone, as Ms. Kwan had neither visited nor contacted him for years. As a child, Sanha had adored his mother, but all he had heard from his grandmother was that she was now living a comfortable life after marrying a doctor. Despite this, Sanha had already resolved not to reconnect with his maternal family, feeling abandoned after years of silence. Though he did not openly express his sadness, Juwon and Haejun could sense it and did their best to cheer him up. Despite having a successful mother in Seoul, Sanha had no desire to depend on her. This was evident when a teacher asked about his choice of university. Rather than selecting a prestigious school in Seoul, he preferred a university closer to home, even though his grades were high enough to apply to top institutions. Hearing this, a female classmate named Huiju approached Sanha for a conversation. Meanwhile, a new rumor about Ju-won began spreading due to the earlier incident. She was accused of being a bully. However, instead of feeling upset, Ju-won felt relieved, thinking that no one would dare bother her anymore. As Ju-won was about to approach Sanha, Park Dao quickly stopped her and explained that the music room where Sanha had entered was often used as a meeting place for couples. From this, Ju-won learned that there was a rumor spreading about Sanha and a girl named Huiju being in a relationship. This made Ju-won upset, as she felt betrayed that Sanha had not told her. However, the truth was that Huiju was merely a classmate who had approached Sanha to ask why he had not chosen a university in Seoul. Not wanting to answer personal questions from Huiju, Sanha clarified that they were just friends and that he did not want her to misunderstand. Sanha then explained to Huiju that when she had confessed her feelings to him, he had only wanted to acknowledge and respect her emotions. He made sure to clear up any misunderstandings in a considerate manner. On their way home, Ju-won continued to sulk, feeling that Sanha had not been honest about having a girlfriend. Amused by her reaction, Sanha chuckled, secretly pleased to see that Ju-won seemed upset by the news. However, when Ju-won said that if they were truly family, then Sanha should have told her, his expression darkened. Annoyed, he firmly stated that even though they were close like family, they were not actually related. At that moment, Sanha felt frustrated because he had been suppressing his true feelings for Ju-won. He did not want to see their bond as that of siblings, nor did he want others to define them as such. He expressed how people often became obsessed with things they did not have, like the idea of family. Even though Ju-won was considered family on paper, to Sanha, that did not matter. As long as they cared for each other, that was enough. Yet, deep down, he did not want them to be real family because of the special feelings he harbored for Ju-won, feelings he was still struggling to understand and accept. Elsewhere, Hae-jun was practicing when he suddenly felt the presence of someone secretly watching him and taking photos. As he attempted to chase the person, they quickly fled, dropping their camera in the process. At that moment, his friends speculated that the individual might have been sent by his mother. However, Hae-jun remained optimistic, believing that if his mother truly missed him, she would contact him directly. Later that day, as he was heading home, Hae-jun unexpectedly ran into his aunt. Although Miss Kong had never visited, his aunt would occasionally check on him and even bring gifts for Mr. Yoon as a token of gratitude for taking care of Hae-jun. Despite being pregnant, she still made the effort to visit. During her visit, Hae-jun's aunt advised him to express his gratitude toward Mr. Yoon for all his kindness. She also reminded him that when he grew older, he should repay the money that had been spent on raising him. Her words saddened Hae-jun, as he had long regarded Mr. Yoon as his own father. Yet reminders like this always made him feel like an outsider, just a foster child. On the other hand, Sanha realized that his words earlier had been too harsh. Wanting to make amends, he tried to be kinder toward Ju-won. However, to his surprise, Ju-won, who usually had a hearty appetite, had suddenly lost interest in food. Sanha eventually apologized to Ju-won and reassured her that he had never hidden anything from her. He explained that he had never been in a relationship with Huiju and that he was still single. He also revealed that Huiju was actually Hae-jun's ex-girlfriend, and they had only just reconciled as friends. However, Ju-won quickly turned her frustration toward Hae-jun, upset that he had never told her about his past relationship. Seeing this, Sanha clarified the situation to Hae-jun, explaining that Ju-won's anger stemmed from Huiju. The next day, by coincidence, Huiju approached Hae-jun. It turned out that they had indeed dated before, but their relationship ended because Huiju had developed feelings for Sanha. Now, after Sanha had rejected her, she wanted to rekindle her relationship with Hae-jun. This angered Hae-jun as he felt like he was being used. Realizing the situation, Hae-jun decided that Ju-won's feelings mattered more to him than getting back together with Huiju. He had no intention of upsetting his sister with such news. However, After being rejected by both Sanha and Haejun, Huiju shifted her focus to Ju-won. She asked Ju-won to help her win Haejun back, claiming that he had misunderstood her and that she had never meant to abandon him. Upon hearing that her brother had been treated that way, Ju-won was furious and walked away. A misunderstanding occurred when Huiju tried to chase after Ju-won, but ended up falling. Even worse, Huiju made it seem as if Ju-won had pushed her, adding fuel to the rumors that had already been spreading about Ju-won. As a result, students around them began whispering and gossiping. Fortunately, Park Dal and Haejun arrived just in time to defend Ju-won. However, seeing the growing negativity, Haejun advised Ju-won to apologize, even though he knew she had done nothing wrong. Sanha, who had always been protective of Ju-won, refused to stay silent. He firmly defended her, warning everyone that if they continued spreading baseless rumors without proof, he would report them to the teachers. He also reassured Ju-won that if she wasn't at fault, she had no reason to apologize. Witnessing how both Haejun and Sanha stood up for her, Ju-won finally realized that she didn't need official adoption papers to feel like part of a family. What truly mattered was how they took care of each other, shared their stories, and supported one another. A piece of paper could never replace the bond they had. Later that night, in an attempt to make amends with Ju-won, Haejun brought her a cake. Their relationship quickly returned to normal, reflecting the deep and unbreakable connection between them. The following day, Haejun was informed by the school security guard that the camera he had left in his care had already been retrieved by its owner. As he scanned his surroundings, he suddenly spotted a figure with a posture strikingly similar to his mother's. Haejun immediately ran after her, but to his disappointment, she was a different person. Embarrassment quickly washed over Haejun, especially since the entire incident had been witnessed by Park Dal, Ju-won's best friend. Determined to keep this secret, Haejun decided to treat Park Dal to a meal, hoping to bribe her into keeping quiet about what had happened. Park Dal was overjoyed to have the opportunity to spend time with Haejun. In truth, she had feelings for him. Apparently, Ju-won was well aware of Park Dal's emotions and wholeheartedly supported their potential relationship, hoping that Haejun would one day reciprocate her feelings. One day, during basketball practice at school, a man suddenly appeared, looking for Haejun. When they met, the man introduced himself as Mr. Yang, who is also Haejun's biological father. The revelation left Haejun overwhelmed with emotions. He wasn't sure whether to feel happy or angry, knowing that his father had only just acknowledged his existence after all these years. Despite his mixed emotions, Haejun felt a slight sense of relief that his father had finally shown up. After the brief encounter, his friends confirmed that the man was indeed his father, as they bore a striking resemblance. Furthermore, Mr. Yang appeared wealthy, driving an expensive car, which led his friends to joke that Haejun was about to become rich. However, from that day on, Haejun became lost in thought, frequently distracted during practice. He felt burdened by the idea of discussing this matter with his adoptive father, fearing that Mr. Yang had come to take him away. Deep down, Haejun believed that his rightful place was with Ju-won's and Sanha's family. Sensing his distress, Sanha urged him to share what was troubling him. Upon hearing his story, Sanha suggested that they confirm the man's identity with Haejun's aunt. Together, they visited her. When Haejun showed her the business card Mr. Yang had given him, his aunt firmly advised him to stay away from the man. She then revealed the painful truth. When Haejun's mother was pregnant, Mr. Yang had abandoned her to marry into wealth. The revelation filled Haejun with deep sorrow and resentment, knowing that his father had chosen money over family. Though he put on a brave face for his aunt, the disappointment weighed heavily on him. On their way home, Sanha did his best to comfort Haejun and encouraged him to meet Mr. Yang in person and demand an explanation. A few days later, Haejun and Sanha confronted Mr. Yang to uncover the true reason behind his sudden appearance after 19 years of absence. At that moment, Mr. Yang admitted that although he was wealthy, his marriage had been childless. Fearing that his fortune would be claimed by his wife's relatives after his passing, he wanted Hae-jun to inherit his wealth. However, Hae-jun resolutely refused. He felt betrayed and had no interest in his father's money or recognition. All he had ever truly wanted was love and care, and this man's return only reopened old wounds, fueling his anger. After the encounter, Hae-jun asked Sanha not to mention any of this to Mr. Yoon. However, unbeknownst to him, Mr. Yang went directly to Ju-won's father and offered a large sum of money in exchange for Hae-jun's custody. Knowing this, Mr. Yoon was speechless but made it clear that the decision ultimately lay with Hae-jun. He also firmly rejected the money, stating that wealth was meaningless. To him, Hae-jun was already like his own son, and the choice was his alone to make. When Hae-jun found out that his biological father had met his adoptive father, he hurried to Mr. Yoon's restaurant. There, he felt a mix of sadness and fear, worried that his adoptive father might send him away. However, Mr. Yoon reassured him that he would never abandon him and had always considered him part of the family. He had no intention of letting Hae-jun go. Hearing those words, Hae-jun was deeply moved, realizing the immense love his adoptive father had given him all this time. Meanwhile, Ju-won learned about the situation from Sanha. Confidently, she declared that Hae-jun would never leave their family. She also insisted that she would not allow him to go, as he was deeply loved by their family. Hae-jun overheard Ju-won and Sanha talking about how sad they would be if he left. Listening to their conversation, he was overwhelmed with emotion, finally understanding that true family is not defined by blood or legal documents, but by the people who are always there for him. Later, Ju-won thought of showing off a letter she was proud of. It turned out to be a love letter addressed to her. A few days ago, she had received an overly dramatic love letter, but she cherished it because it was the first one she had ever received. The next day, Ju-won was determined to find out who had sent the anonymous letter. However, Hae-jun advised her not to look for the sender, suggesting that she might be disappointed by his appearance. Despite his warning, Ju-won continued her search with Park Dal. After asking around, they finally discovered the sender's identity. Ju-won was pleased to find that he was quite good-looking. When she asked him directly, the young man, named Jun-ho, admitted to writing the letter and even invited Ju-won on a date. During their meal together, Ju-won started feeling irritated by Jun-ho's picky eating habits. Later, when they visited Ju-won's favorite cafe and she wanted to buy some cake, Jun-ho refused to join her. Despite this, they still enjoyed spending time together until the evening. At one point, Jun-ho complimented Ju-won, saying she was cheerful despite growing up with only a father. He mentioned that his mother had once told him that incomplete families often produced cold and unlikable individuals, but Ju-won had proven otherwise. Ju-won was immediately offended, feeling as though her family was being looked down upon simply because she didn't have a mother. Annoyed, she decided to end the date early. She was frustrated that people often pitted her just because she didn't have a mother. In reality, she was grateful to have a loving father and two protective brothers. When Ju-won arrived home, her family was surprised to see her eating so eagerly as if she hadn't eaten at all. Sanha, however, was pleased, interpreting it as a sign that her date had not gone well. When asked about it, Ju-won simply stated that she didn't like Jun-ho because he was too picky with food, a response that puzzled Hae-jun. However, her father and Mr. Kim seemed to understand perfectly. The next day, news spread that Ju-won had rejected Jun-ho. Later, Jun-ho approached her to apologize, and with her kind heart, Ju-won accepted his apology on one condition: he must never speak about what they discussed the previous day. However, Sanha advised Ju-won to be firm and clearly state that she had no romantic feelings for Jun-ho. Unexpectedly, Sanha's mother, Miss Kwan, appeared after 10 years of absence. For the past few days, she had been calling Sanha, but he ignored her calls. Determined, she finally came in person to see him. At that moment, Sanha firmly stated that he had ignored her calls because he had no desire to meet her. Without a hint of remorse, Miss Kwan acknowledged his feelings but insisted that she wanted to reconnect. She also introduced So-hee, Sanha's younger stepsister. His heart ached even more when Miss Kwan claimed she had come back to forgive him, as if he were the one at fault. Sanha felt deeply misunderstood. He had done nothing wrong, yet his mother made it seem otherwise. Meanwhile, Ju-won and Hae-jun decided to wait and observe how Sanha handled the situation. However, unable to suppress his own emotions, Hae-jun chose to leave. He envied Sanha for being able to see his mother again, even though he knew little about her character. On the other hand, when Miss Kwan mentioned Sanha's deceased sibling, Sanha could no longer bear it. He walked away, praying that his mother would find happiness without him. Throughout the day, Sanha found himself lost in thought, dwelling on painful memories that had begun to resurface. In his distraction, he nearly walked into the path of an oncoming truck. Fortunately, Ju-won pulled him back just in time. Deeply shaken, she scolded him for his carelessness. Seeing her anger, Sanha simply laughed. Ju-won was the only one who could make him forget his sadness, even for a moment. To lighten her mood, Sanha invited Ju-won to have a meal together and even bought her favorite cake. At the same time, Miss Kwan met with her ex-husband to discuss their son. She expressed her desire to reconnect with Sanha, but her ex-husband reminded her to respect their son's wishes. If Sanha didn't want to see her, that choice should be honored. However, she persisted, arguing that if Sanha moved to Seoul for college, it would be better for his future. This led to an argument, as Mr. Kim believed that Sanha's mental and emotional well-being mattered more than any prestigious education. If their son didn't want to see his mother, then he would fully support that decision. Sanha still carried the scars of being abandoned. Even though Miss Kwan now wished to return to his life, she remained unchanged in one aspect. She always expected to be understood without ever taking responsibility for the past. As the one who had left, it was her duty to make amends and heal Sanha's wounds, not to shift the blame onto others. It turned out she had also done this because her daughter, So-hee, wanted to meet her older brother. It was reminiscent of how Ju-won, when she was little, had always wished for an older sibling. At home, while spending time with the family, Sanha informed Mr. Yoon that he had met his mother. Hearing this, Hae-jun became upset and refused to listen to anything related to the topic of mothers. Frustrated, Sanha firmly stated that he had told his mother not to contact him again. He then turned to Hae-jun and asked if that made him happy. A misunderstanding arose between them. Hae-jun felt envious that Sanha had the opportunity to see his mother, while Sanha wished that Hae-jun would understand that not all mother-child relationships were as beautiful as he imagined. Yet, Sanha hesitated to explain his painful experiences in detail. Sometimes, within families, wounds are inflicted rather than healed. That was the reality of Sanha's relationship with Miss Kwan, something he hoped Hae-jun would one day understand. However, Ju-won could only explain to Sanha that Hae-jun was acting that way simply because he missed his mother. And with that, she hoped that Sanha could understand. The next day, Sanha met Junho and warned him to stay away from Ju-won. However, Junho admitted that he liked Ju-won because of her cheerful personality. This reminded Sanha of what Ju-won had said the night before, that even though people called her cheerful despite not having a mother, she didn't care but still resented those who said it. When Junho confessed that he was the one who had said it, Sanha and Hae-jun were ready to confront him. However, before anything could happen, Ju-won arrived just in time to stop them. Later, Sanha told Ju-won that she should share her worries instead of keeping them to herself, just as she wanted him to open up to her. Hearing this, Ju-won promised that from now on, she would share both the good and bad things with him. Unexpectedly, Miss Kwan arrived at Mr. Yoon's restaurant with So-hee, waiting for her son to return. When Sanha arrived, his mother wanted to introduce So-hee to him. At that moment, So-hee, his stepsister, looked strikingly similar to his late younger sibling. Not wanting the conversation to be overheard by a child, Sanha asked Ju-won to take So-hee to play elsewhere. Once again, Sanha refused Miss Kwan's offer to go to Seoul and firmly asked her not to meet with him anymore. He assured her that she need not worry about his education, as he would pursue his studies here. Despite this, Miss Kwan insisted that families should live together and expressed her desire to stay with him. However, for Sanha, his true family was here. Hae-jun, who had been eavesdropping, tried to convince Sanha not to be so harsh toward his mother. But even after rejecting the plea, Hae-jun continued to push him to reconsider, which only made Sanha angrier. At one moment, Sanha snapped, saying that his relationship with his mother was nothing like Hae-jun's. At the very least, Hae-jun's mother had promised to return for him. Then, Sanha questioned whether Hae-jun still believed in her words. The reality was that both of them had been abandoned by their mothers. This angered Hae-jun, who still held on to the hope that his mother would return. Meanwhile, Mr. Yoon advised Miss Kwan to give him time and not force things. He suggested that she let Sanha focus on his studies until he entered university, after which she could try asking him to meet So-hee. However, Miss Kwan refused and instead questioned why the once obedient Sanha had turned so cold toward her. This angered Mr. Yoon, who pointed out that Sanha had changed because she abandoned him. Even when Miss Kwan left for Seoul, she never once asked whether Sanha wanted to go with her. In truth, Miss Kwan was the one who had hurt him, yet now she was questioning why he was acting this way. Their discussion was interrupted by the commotion between Sanha and Hae-jun. Seeing this, Ju-won and Mr. Yoon quickly stepped in to separate them. The tense atmosphere carried over to their shared meal. Ju-won explained to Mr. Kim how everything had escalated. In short, this conflict had been going on for about a week, making Ju-won increasingly anxious since neither of them had reconciled. However, when Junho invited Ju-won on a cycling trip, an idea struck her. She decided to invite her two older brothers along, hoping that the trip would help them make amends. She also invited Park Dal to join them. The day of the trip arrived, and the three of them were taken aback. The place that was supposed to be quiet, as it had just opened, was suddenly crowded. This was all because Ju-won had openly announced that she would be bringing her two older brothers there, prompting many others to come as well. After waiting for quite some time, Park Dal had yet to arrive as she was still on her way. In the end, the three of them decided to go cycling without her. During the ride, Ju-won put on her headset and cycled alone, hoping that her two brothers would have a chance to talk. Both of them laughed at Ju-won's persistent efforts to make them reconcile. However, instead of making peace, they ended up arguing again, rendering Ju-won's efforts futile. Frustrated by her failed attempt, Ju-won became upset and insisted on going home separately. On her way back, she spotted Park Dal being harassed by a group of men. In response, she immediately stepped in to protect her. At the same time, a female student who witnessed the scene quickly informed Sanha and Hae-jun about the situation. Meanwhile, Ju-won, who had been struggling with a fever, suddenly collapsed. Panic ensued, and even the men who had been harassing Park Dal tried to offer water so Ju-won could take her medicine. However, this led to a misunderstanding. When Sanha and Hae-jun arrived, they saw Ju-won unconscious and immediately assumed the worst. Without hesitation, they attacked the men, leading to all of them ending up at the police station. It was only there that Sanha and Hae-jun realized they had misunderstood the situation and quickly apologized. Shortly after, Mr. Kim also arrived as a representative. To ensure Ju-won wouldn't push herself too hard while sick just to mend their relationship, the two of them reluctantly agreed to get along, at least in front of her. As time passed, Ju-won felt relieved seeing that Sanha and Hae-jun were now on good terms, even at school. However, the events of the previous day led to a rumor that Hae-jun had feelings for Park Dal. The rumor started because Hae-jun had been the first to rush to protect Park Dal when he heard she was in trouble. This rumor made Ju-won drag Park Dal to confess her feelings to Hae-jun before it was too late. However, when they arrived, Hae-jun was already speaking with Hui-ju. At that moment, Huiju directly asked Jun about his feelings for Park Dao. With no other choice, he firmly denied the rumor, stating that he had no romantic interest, which led Park Dao to abandon her plan of confessing. As time passed, Jun's birthday approached. Sanha and Ju-won planned to buy him a gift. They both decided on a pair of shoes for Jun. At the same time, Sanha thought of getting a pair for Ju-won as well, promising to buy her even better ones in the future. Unexpectedly, the store employee gave them a discount, commenting on how they looked like an adorable couple. As they were about to leave, Sanha and Ju-won unexpectedly ran into So-hee and Miss Kwon. At that moment, So-hee excitedly ran after Sanha, but she suddenly tripped and fell, making Sanha worry. However, Miss Kwon instead scolded So-hee, saying she could have gotten hurt just because she wanted to see Sanha. These words deeply hurt Sanha. Hearing this, Ju-won immediately defended Sanha, saying that he had always been a source of good fortune for her whenever they were together. Her words instantly lifted Sanha's spirits. In that moment, he realized just how much Ju-won cared for him, and perhaps that was also why his feelings for her were beginning to grow. Several days later, Jun's birthday arrived. Sanha, who had always been open with Ju-won, suddenly found himself feeling shy around her. For instance, he refused to change clothes in front of her, something he had never hesitated to do before. That same day, Jun's aunt visited to celebrate. She then took Jun aside to discuss his biological father. Apparently, she believed that it would be best for Jun to live with his father, as she felt guilty toward Mr. Yoon. She didn't want Jun to be a burden on Mr. Yoon, especially since he would soon be starting college, which would require significant financial support. However, neither of them realized that Mr. Yoon was overhearing their conversation. Tension arose when Jun's aunt expressed her gratitude to Mr. Yoon for raising Jun all these years. She suggested that Jun should repay this kindness when he grows older. However, her words deeply offended Mr. Yoon, who firmly stated that he had never considered raising Jun as a debt to be repaid. To him, Jun was his son, and he had never expected anything in return. Mr. Yoon even remarked that if he had been able to take in Jun when he was still a child, he would have raised him without ever revealing that he wasn't his biological father. He wanted Jun to grow up happy, without feeling any obligation to repay him. Realizing that her words had hurt Mr. Yoon, Jun's aunt apologized. This moment also helped her recognize the strong family bond between Ju-won and Jun. Now reassured, she advised Jun to forget about his mother and focus on treating Mr. Yoon well. Though saddened by her words, Jun pretended to be unaffected, claiming that he had already moved on. This conversation ultimately strengthened their family ties, allowing them to be more open with each other. As a result, the relationship between Jun and Sanha also returned to normal. The next day, however, Mr. Yoon was caught off guard when Miss Kong unexpectedly arrived at his restaurant. She had come to settle her debt and return the money Mr. Yoon had spent raising Jun. She also made it clear that she had no intention of seeing her son. Mr. Yoon tried to convince Miss Kong to meet Jun, but she firmly refused, saying that was not the reason for a visit. This angered Mr. Yoon, as he knew how much Jun had longed to see his mother, only to have her reject him so easily. Meanwhile, as Sanha was sleeping, his mother called with alarming news, so he had gone missing after leaving alone to find him. Panic spread as everyone searched for her. Fortunately, so he had wandered into a restaurant nearby, where the owner called the police. Coincidentally, the responding officer was Mr. Kim. At that very moment, Sanha also called to report So-hee's disappearance, leading Mr. Kim to realize that the little girl in front of him was indeed So-hee. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief upon finding her safe. However, when Miss Kwon arrived, she immediately placed the blame on Sanha and the others for letting So-hee go missing. She insisted that if Sanha had agreed to come with them, So-hee wouldn't have run off on her own. She also argued that families should stay together, which enraged Sanha. He was furious that the mother who had abandoned him now suddenly wanted to reunite without considering his feelings. Worse still, Miss Kwan also blamed everyone else for what had happened. This was what frustrated him the most. Finally, both Hae-jun and Ju-won understood why San-ha had no desire to meet his mother. While San-ha felt sad and embarrassed that his strained relationship with his mother was now known to the entire family, Mr. Kim firmly told his ex-wife that none of this was San-ha's fault. Instead, he insisted that they, as parents, were to blame for not taking better care of their children, which ultimately led to their daughter's tragic passing. He reminded her that, if anything, she should feel sympathy for San-ha, who had to witness the heartbreaking moment firsthand. Since the previous day's events, San-ha had been avoiding family meals, worrying Ju-won. In response, Ju-won often brought him packed meals to ensure he didn't go hungry. This small gesture deeply touched San-ha, as it showed just how much Ju-won cared about him. One rainy day, Ju-won even braved the storm to bring San-ha an umbrella, but by the time she found him, he had already reached home. Feeling embarrassed, San-ha admitted that he had been avoiding her because he didn't want her to see him in such a vulnerable state after his argument with his mother. However, Ju-won ignored his excuses and simply insisted that he join them for a meal. It was only then that San-ha realized she had been looking for him for over an hour just to give him the umbrella. Moved by the kindness of Ju-won and her family, San-ha decided to stop isolating himself and rejoin them. However, after spending too much time in the rain, he fell ill with a fever. Fortunately, everyone took turns taking care of him, and by the next day, he had recovered. A few days later, things returned to normal, and good news arrived. Hae-jun's aunt had just given birth. The bond between Hae-jun, San-ha, and Park-dal grew even stronger. However, Hae-jun, being oblivious as ever, assumed that Park-dal was hanging out with them because she had a crush on San-ha. This misunderstanding irritated Ju-won, but she chose not to argue about it. Meanwhile, uneasiness crept into Hae-jun's heart when he visited his aunt and heard something unexpected. A nurse casually mentioned how much he resembled his mother, who had recently visited. After confirming with his aunt, Hae-jun learned that his mother had already met with Mr. Yoon to pay off her debt. She had even visited his aunt to offer financial assistance. However, Ms. Kang had never made an effort to see Hae-jun. Elsewhere, Mr. Yang is seen discussing his wife with Mr. Kim, revealing his distress over her sudden appearance. At that moment, Mr. Yang admitted that he hadn't told Hae-jun about it because he didn't want to hurt him. Unbeknownst to them, Hae-jun had just returned from visiting his aunt and overheard everything. Their conversation confirmed what he had feared. His mother truly didn't care about him. On the way home, San-ha and Ju-won shared a close moment. Ju-won, being clumsy, accidentally tripped and fell onto San-ha. In that moment, San-ha felt his heart race and finally admitted to himself that he had feelings for Ju-won. As they continued their walk, the two encountered Hae-jun, who appeared troubled. Hae-jun shared what he had just discovered, explaining how he had once thought he wouldn't mind if his mother never returned. However, after realizing that she had come back just to settle her debts, without even bothering to see him, Hae-jun couldn't help but feel deeply hurt. Later, when Hae-jun returned home, he helped Mr. Yoon with some chores and mentioned that he already knew about his mother's visit. Hae-jun immediately reassured Mr. Yoon that he had heard it from his aunt and that it was fine. Moments later, Hae-jun even asked Mr. Yoon to tell his mother that he didn't want to see her if she ever returned. He said this not because he truly meant it, but because Hae-jun wanted to ease Mr. Yoon's burden. Deep inside, however, the pain of abandonment weighed heavily on him. Meanwhile, as the days passed, San-ha started to avoid letting Ju-won into his room. He found himself feeling flustered and nervous whenever they were alone together. To cover up his feelings, he used upcoming exams as an excuse, claiming that he needed to focus on studying and couldn't afford distractions. Ju-won, noticing the sudden distance, became easily irritated. She was frustrated that San-ha was acting differently from before. However, after seeing one of her friends make an encouraging note for her boyfriend to motivate him for exams, Ju-won and Park Dao came up with an idea of their own. Not long after, the day of the exam finally arrived. During this time, Ju-won gave Sanha a box of chocolates along with an encouraging card, which made Sanha happy. Both Sanha and Hae-jun, who were in their final year of high school, took the exam successfully. Afterward, they celebrated their hard work with Park Dao, enjoying a small party together. During the celebration, Ju-won accidentally burned her hand while roasting skewers, causing Sanha to worry. He immediately helped treat her burn. Meanwhile, as Hae-jun and Park Dao were alone, he confided in her about his mother's unexpected visit. Hearing his sad story moved Park Dao to tears, but her sadness quickly turned into frustration when Hae-jun mistakenly assumed she had a crush on Sanha. This misunderstanding annoyed Park Dao, and to make matters worse, Hae-jun encouraged Sanha to walk her home as a gesture of support. On the way back, Park Dao considered correcting the misunderstanding, but before she could, Sanha admitted that he already knew she actually liked Hae-jun. He reassured her to be patient with Hae-jun and his oblivious nature. Later on, after receiving nearly perfect exam scores, Sanha was encouraged to apply to a prestigious university in Seoul. With his academic abilities, he had a strong chance of being accepted into a top-tier school. However, to his teacher's surprise, Sanha refused the opportunity. Even after the teacher contacted his father, Mr. Kim left the decision entirely up to Sanha, trusting his judgment. At the same time, an intense basketball match between their school and Winyong High, a school known for its elite basketball players, was about to take place. The entire school gathered to watch. Unexpectedly, Mr. Young also attended after hearing about Hae-jun's exceptional basketball skills. As the team's star player, Hae-jun had the potential for a bright future in the sport. However, Mr. Yang believed that if Hae-jun chose to attend an unknown university, his talent would go unnoticed and unappreciated. He planned to use basketball as a reason to convince Hae-jun to go with him. Shortly after, the game began with fierce competition from both sides, with Hae-jun playing a crucial role in securing his team's victory. After witnessing his son's impressive performance, Hae-jun's father decided to meet with Mr. Yoon, a fact that Sanha overheard. Realizing what was happening, Sanha rushed to warn Hae-jun. When Mr. Young arrived, he proposed sending Hae-jun to a prestigious basketball academy in America, known for training future stars. He tried to persuade Mr. Yoon not to let Hae-jun's talent go to waste by enrolling him in an unknown university. He insisted that if Mr. Yoon truly cared for Hae-jun, he would allow him to pursue greater opportunities. As a result, Mr. Yoon remained silent, knowing deep down that he wanted the best for Hae-jun but lacked the financial means to support such a decision. Determined to have his way, Mr. Yang spoke directly with his son, once again attempting to persuade him. However, Hae-jun firmly refused. Running out of options, Mr. Yang resorted to threats, claiming that with his wealth, he could shut down Mr. Yoon's restaurant at any time. This weighed heavily on Hae-jun's mind. That evening during dinner, Mr. Yoon brought up the idea of studying basketball in America, asking Hae-jun for his thoughts. However, Hae-jun knew the real reason behind the conversation. He reassured Mr. Yoon that he had no desire to leave and that he wanted to attend a university close to home. However, trouble arose when the three of them gathered on the rooftop. Sanha received distressing news. Miss Kwan had been in a traffic accident, and her husband, who was in the passenger seat, had passed away. Without hesitation, Sanha and Mr. Kim rushed to the hospital to see her. Upon arrival, they found Miss Kwan severely injured and in the middle of surgery. Fortunately, after several hours, the operation was successful. Despite this, Miss Kwan needed time to regain consciousness. Throughout the night, Sanha kept Ju-won, who was waiting at home, updated so that she would not worry. The next morning, they planned to return home. However, little So-hee did not want to be left alone with just the housemaid, which made Sanha feel reluctant to leave. In the end, he decided to stay and take care of So-hee until their mother woke up. Although there were certain reasons that distanced Sanha from his mother, he still cared for So-hee as his younger sister. While waiting and looking after So-hee, Sanha frequently exchanged messages with Ju-won. Though they never said it directly, they both missed each other dearly. Driven by this longing, Ju-won considered visiting him. However, neither her father nor Hae-jun could accompany her as they were occupied with work and school. Since she was not allowed to go alone, she decided to sneak away on her own. Without permission, Ju-won set off and asked Park-dal to cover for her if anyone asked about her whereabouts. She instructed Park-dal to say that she was with her, as she had already lied about going out together. Upon arriving at the hospital, Ju-won witnessed the close bond between Sanha and So-hee, who was overjoyed that their mother had regained consciousness. Seeing this, Ju-won became aware of her place. Even though they verbally refer to each other as siblings, the truth remained that they were not related by blood, and she was merely an outsider. This realization made Ju-won hesitant to intrude on Sanha's happiness. Meanwhile, Hae-jun happened to run into Park-dal after she left her tutoring session. This unexpected meeting made him realize that Ju-won had lied to him. After all, she was not the type to be interested in studying, and there was no way she had attended a tutoring session with Park-dal. Later, after waiting for a long time, Hae-jun finally caught Ju-won at the station. Though he scolded her, she simply pouted, still troubled by what she had seen at the hospital. After sending her home, Hae-jun decided to stop by Mr. Yoon's restaurant, only to find that it was still open despite usually closing at 7 p.m. Now, it remained open until 10 p.m., which made him wonder why Mr. Yoon was working so late. On the other hand, Sanha grew increasingly anxious as Miss Kwan's mental condition deteriorated. She had fallen into depression due to the loss of her husband in the accident. To make matters worse, the accident had left her with a severe injury, making it likely that she would never walk again. Seeing Miss Kwan in such a state deeply saddened Sanha. Though he harbored some resentment toward her, his love for her was far greater. At that moment, his uncle advised him to pursue his studies in Seoul so he could live closer to his mother and So-hee. After all, what their mother needed most at that moment was family support. This suggestion left Sanha conflicted. The next morning, Ju-won was delighted to hear that Sanha would be returning the following day. However, she soon realized that her father was not at home. When she checked the restaurant, she found out that Mr. Yoon had collapsed from overworking, which worried both Ju-won and Hae-jun. When Mr. Kim inquired about the reason behind Mr. Yoon's excessive workload, it was revealed that he had been pushing himself to ensure that Hae-jun could attend a prestigious university. Mr. Yoon had been deeply affected by the words of Mr. Yang, who planned to send him to America for school. As a father, Mr. Yoon wanted to secure a bright future for Hae-jun, which motivated him to work tirelessly. He could not bear the thought of failing to send Hae-jun to a good university, as he knew it would be one of his greatest regrets. Unbeknownst to both of them, Hae-jun overheard the entire conversation and finally understood why Mr. Yoon had been working so hard all this time. Feeling lost, Hae-jun sought advice from a friend. His friend suggested that he follow his biological father to America. That way, Mr. Yoon would no longer have to overexert himself to pay for his education. His friend also advised that once Hae-jun became successful, he could return and take care of Mr. Yoon. Hae-jun continued to ponder over this suggestion, especially after seeing Mr. Yoon push himself to keep the restaurant open despite being unwell. This strengthened his decision. After helping Mr. Yoon serve customers until closing time, Hae-jun finally revealed his decision to follow Mr. Yang to America. Although Mr. Yoon tried to dissuade him, he realized that he could not force his will upon Hae-jun if his mind was already made up. This left Mr. Yoon deeply saddened. Several days later, Sanha finally returned home. Ju-won was overjoyed and immediately hugged Sanha, overwhelmed by how much she had missed him. Amidst their reunion, Sanha quickly noticed that Hae-jun seemed lost in thought. Concerned, he asked what was wrong. Hae-jun then revealed his plan to follow his biological father to America. Hearing this, Sanha immediately objected, reminding him that he Two would be leaving for Seoul to live with his mother. Sanha argued that if they both left, Ju-won would be heartbroken, and at least one of them should stay. While he understood Hae-jun's situation, Sanha remained firm in his opposition and urged him to consider Mr. Yoon's sacrifices in raising him. According to Sanha, if Hae-jun still chose to leave, everyone would see him as an ungrateful son who abandoned Mr. Yoon. These words sparked an argument between them. Unbeknownst to them, Ju-won had overheard the entire dispute. Realizing that Ju-won had learned the truth, Sanha admitted that both he and Hae-jun had planned to leave. Although Ju-won pleaded with her father to stop them, Mr. Yoon had already accepted their decisions. However, for Ju-won, it seemed as though Hae-jun only wanted to leave comfortably with his wealthy biological father, without considering anyone else's feelings. Meanwhile, Sanha, whom she had always regarded as family, prioritized his mother, the very person who had hurt him in the past, without caring about her or her father's feelings simply because they were not blood-related. To Ju-won, Sanha's insistence on leaving only reinforced the belief that he did not care about them. She felt particularly hurt because Sanha had made this life-changing decision without considering her feelings or opinions. It seemed as if their bond and closeness had meant nothing to him. However, Sanha chose to accept Ju-won's perception of him without offering an explanation. He did not want to burden her with his personal struggles, particularly the complexities of his relationship with his mother. Later, Sanha finally explained to his father why he wanted to stay with his mother. He revealed that while he was there, Ms. Kwon had attempted to do the unthinkable twice. That realization compelled him to stay and take care of her, ensuring that such a tragedy would never happen again. Sanha and Hae-jun's decision to leave left Ju-won feeling angry and disappointed. She started skipping meals and often sat in silence, lost in her sadness. Over time, however, she gradually came to terms with reality. Once firm in her belief that the three of them were family, she now began to see that neither Sanha nor Hae-jun were truly her siblings. Their decision to leave made her feel as though she and her father were no longer a priority to them. After much reflection, Ju-won finally accepted their decision. With sincerity, she thanked Sanha for the happiness he had brought her during their childhood. Though she was heartbroken at the thought of losing the warmth they once shared, she tried her best to accept it. In return, Sanha promised that he would visit during the holidays and return for good after graduating from university. He vowed that once he came back, he would never leave Ju-won again. The day of their departure finally arrived. Although Sanha was certain about his decision, his heart felt heavy as he prepared to leave, weighed down by his feelings for Ju-won. However, she chose not to be there to say goodbye. Parting ways with them was too painful for her. A year passed, and on Ju-won's birthday, though the celebration was small with only 3 people, Sanha and Hae-jun still called to wish her a happy birthday. Yet, as time went on, by the 5th year, they had stopped communicating entirely. From that point forward, Ju-won no longer celebrated her birthday with her family, feeling that the tradition had lost its meaning without Sanha and Hae-jun by her side. 10 years passed, and Ju-won had grown into a successful woman, managing her own pastry shop. She now lived in an apartment with her best friend, Park Dao, who had become a lawyer. One day, while Ju-won was out picking fruit, a mysterious figure broke into her store. Upon returning, she quickly realized that a stranger had entered. Without hesitation, she caught the intruder, overpowered him, and took him to the police station. News of the arrest soon reached Mr. Yoon and Mr. Kim, prompting them to rush to the station. When the intruder's identity was revealed, it turned out to be none other than Hae-jun. An unexpected reunion took place. Mr. Yoon was overwhelmed with emotion, having longed to see Hae-jun after years without contact. However, Ju-won was anything but pleased. She was furious. In her anger, she even insisted that Hae-jun be sent to prison. Meanwhile, Sanha had also returned to their hometown after a decade. When he visited Ju-won's shop and noticed something was amiss, he immediately made his way to the police station. Sanha finally reunited with his father and his adoptive father. For the first time in 10 years, their family was together again. Everyone was overjoyed to see the family whole once more, except for Ju-won, who was still deeply hurt. Later, she confronted Sanha, reminding him of the promise he had made to return after graduating, a promise he had broken. Because of her disappointment, she had never responded to any of his messages over the years. Hae-jun, on the other hand, had never reached out at all, making Ju-won even more resentful towards him. Hae-jun admitted that he had struggled to contact them. He had just finished his military service and had not owned a phone. His explanation worried everyone, particularly because he had once been a promising basketball player. The fact that he had chosen to enlist in the military early raised many questions. Though Ju-won felt a moment of concern, she quickly buried her emotions and returned to her shop. Despite her outward resentment toward their return, Park Dal was delighted to see Hae-jun again, as she had harbored feelings for him in the past. Meanwhile, Sanha made an effort to reconnect with Ju-won, leaving her conflicted about how to respond after so many years apart. Later, Hae-jun and Sanha announced to the family that they intended to stay in town for good. Hae-jun also confessed that he had quit basketball and had chosen to enlist in the military early. At that moment, Mr. Yoon did not press for further explanations. He was simply happy to have them back and hoped they could celebrate Ju-won's birthday together like they used to. However, Ju-won refused, firmly stating that they were no longer the same family and rejecting any invitation to gather. Sanha tried to persuade her, hoping to rebuild their closeness, but Ju-won remained cold and distant. The next day, Ju-won was shocked to find out that Sanha and Hae-jun had moved into the apartment next door. Feeling frustrated, she vented her anger on Hae-jun, demanding that he help out at her bakery since he was currently unemployed. Though she seemed irritated, Ju-won couldn't ignore Hae-jun's disheveled appearance and gave him some money to buy new clothes. Despite her resentment, a sense of responsibility and lingering attachment to her childhood companions prevented her from completely turning away. In the neighborhood, people began comparing Hae-jun to Sanha, but Mr. Yoon remained grateful. He didn't care whether Hae-jun was successful or not. As long as he was healthy, that was enough to make him happy. However, unbeknownst to everyone, Hae-jun had been secretly searching for a large building to open a restaurant, an unspoken dream he had been planning for Mr. Yoon. Meanwhile, at the hospital where Sanha worked, he reunited with his old friends, Junho and Huiju. Despite his composed demeanor, he was under constant pressure from Miss Kwon, who frequently demanded updates about him, insisting that they should still live together. This was also why Sanha had never returned home after graduating. His mother had always prevented him. Even now, he couldn't bring himself to tell her that he intended to settle in this town. Instead, he simply told her he was on vacation. As for Sanha, he made continuous efforts to reconnect with Ju-won, waiting for her outside her bakery to walk her home. One day, they ended up sharing ice cream together, just like in their high school days. At one moment, Sanha confessed that this was the first time he had eaten ice cream in 10 years, making Ju-won realize how busy he must have been, rarely having time to enjoy life's simple pleasures. As Ju-won's birthday approached, Sanha invited her once again to have a meal together, just like old times. However, she declined, saying she already had plans. With a resigned smile, Sanha wished her an early happy birthday, knowing he might not get another chance to see her before his demanding hospital schedule resumed. What Ju-won didn't realize was that Sanha had sacrificed his precious rest time just to be with the people he cherished. Though she appeared indifferent, she couldn't shake her growing concern, worrying about Hae-jun's worn-out condition and the overwhelming workload of Sanha. Even though Ju-won refused to join family gatherings, nostalgic memories of their past together lingered in her mind. Eventually, she decided to attend the gathering after all. Her presence delighted everyone, and though she tried not to show it, she, too, felt the warmth of the moment. During the dinner, Ju-won finally confronted Hae-jun about his disappearance over the past 5 years. She argued that if he had truly quit basketball, He should have returned home instead of vanishing without a trace. Even Mr. Yoon had once reached out to Mr. Yang, only to be told to stay out of their affairs, words that had deeply hurt Mr. Yoon. As Hae-jun struggled to answer, San-ha spoke up, revealing that Hae-jun had suffered a serious injury to his leg. That was the real reason he had to quit basketball, and perhaps he had disappeared to avoid causing worry from Mr. Yoon and Ju-won. San-ha knew about this because Hae-jun had once called him, desperately asking whether he could ever play again. But the severity of his injury had sealed his fate. Returning to the sport was no longer an option. Upon hearing this, Mr. Yoon was deeply saddened. He couldn't hold back his tears, overwhelmed by guilt. He wondered if he had stopped Hae-jun from going to America, perhaps the injury wouldn't have happened. This also explained why Hae-jun rarely wore shoes now. Ju-won then expressed that she had always asked the three of them to share both their joys and sorrows. It was a value that meant a great deal to her. They had not returned as promised after graduating from college, but what hurt Ju-won the most was that neither of them had ever revealed the true reason they couldn't come back. Because of that, she felt they could never be the same as before. To Ju-won, they had become strangers. The years of waiting had only led to disappointment. Even after saying all that, when San-ha was asked why he hadn't returned as promised, he merely answered that he had been busy. That response made Ju-won unwilling to hear any further explanations from him, knowing that wasn't the real reason. That night, Ju-won planned to celebrate her birthday with her old school friends. San-ha intended to attend the party, and Hae-jun also came, bringing her a pair of shoes as a gift. Surprisingly, the usually lazy Hae-jun actively helped Ju-won serve food. He also noticed that Ju-won wanted her friends to leave so she could close the shop. Understanding her unspoken wish, he invited the guests to continue the celebration elsewhere. Meanwhile, Ju-won grew anxious about San-ha, who had not yet arrived. Junho then mentioned that San-ha wouldn't be able to make it because he was caught up at the hospital, tending to an unexpectedly high number of patients. Upon learning this, Ju-won messaged San-ha, telling him the party was over and advising him not to force himself to come. San-ha, who had been excited to celebrate Ju-won's birthday, felt an immediate wave of disappointment upon receiving her message. When he returned to his apartment, he could only leave his gift in front of her door without seeing her in person. Fortunately, the pair of earrings he had chosen made Ju-won happy, and she expressed her gratitude. Her response lifted San-ha's spirits, and he took the opportunity to ask her out for dinner. However, Ju-won declined, saying she had other plans. This left San-ha feeling uneasy. Curious, he asked Junho about it and learned that Ju-won had recently grown close to one of her customers and might soon start dating him. It seemed she had finally started responding after ignoring the man for a long time. This revelation frustrated San-ha, now realizing why she had rejected his invitation. Without hesitation, he rushed to Ju-won's shop and stopped her from leaving. In that moment, he finally confessed his feelings. He liked her. Hearing his confession, Ju-won was stunned. A whirlwind of thoughts filled her mind, making her forget about her planned date. To her, San-ha was still family, nothing more, nothing less. However, after that night, Ju-won's demeanor changed. She became restless, constantly on edge whenever she saw San-ha, unable to act as she usually would. Instead, she chose to avoid him altogether. Her close friend, Park Dao, quickly noticed the shift in her behavior. Sensing that something was different, she asked San-ha directly, and without hesitation, he admitted his feelings for Ju-won. A knowing smile spread across his face when he heard that Ju-won had canceled her date. Perhaps there was still hope for him. Though Ju-won tried to dismiss the reality of San-ha's confession, she found herself waiting for his messages, her heart racing whenever her phone rang. Even when she answered his calls, Ju-won couldn't hide her nervousness. It was a feeling she couldn't ignore, no matter how much she tried to deny it. Seeing this, Park Dao gave Ju-won some advice. If she truly wanted to hide her emotions, she should treat San-ha just as she had before, like an older brother. When the next family dinner arrived, Ju-won made an effort to act normally, as she had during their high school days. With a warm smile, she greeted both Sanha and Hae-jun, calling them brother like she used to. After dinner, Ju-won told Sanha that she would forget about his confession from the previous day because, to her, Sanha had always been like a brother. However, Sanha refused to let go of his feelings so easily. He asked Ju-won that if she truly still saw him as a brother, then she should erase all their past memories and start anew, treating today as the first day of their meeting. He pleaded for a chance to win her heart, this time with romantic feelings. His words shook Ju-won, just as much as they challenged Sanha himself, who, despite appearing calm, was struggling to gather the courage to finally express emotions he had kept hidden for the past 10 years. He no longer wanted to bear them alone. Amid this emotional turmoil, a new problem arose. Mr. Kim received a phone call from his Miss Kwon, questioning Sanha's return. She was convinced that he had only been granted a 1-month vacation. This worried the family because they knew Sanha intended to stay permanently. They soon realized that he had not informed Ms. Kwon about his decision to settle down there. Ju-won also began to understand why Sanha had struggled to return for the past decade. Given how protective Ms. Kwon was, it was likely that she would never approve of his decision. When Mr. Kim and Mr. Yoon asked him to confirm his plans, Sanha admitted that he had made up his mind despite the complications with his mother. He had chosen to live in this place, with the family he had longed for. During their conversation, Sanha noticed that Mr. Yoon was struggling to walk, so he suggested making an appointment with an orthopedic specialist. The next day, Ju-won and her father accompanied Mr. Yoon to the hospital for treatment, showing how much Sanha cared for them. While Mr. Yoon was being examined by the doctor, Ju-won found herself alone with Sanha, who led her to a hospital room. Even though no one else noticed, Sanha was deeply aware that Ju-won's wrist was hurting, and he personally tended to her injury. From that point on, Ju-won's feelings for Sanha slowly began to change. She found herself nervous whenever she was alone with him. Yet, she continued to deny that it was love, convincing herself that they were still just like family. After her wrist was treated by another nurse, Ju-won observed the closeness between Sanha and Hui-ju, which unexpectedly sparked jealousy in her. Even Mr. Yoon seemed pleased and supportive of their bond. This jealousy did not escape Sanha's notice, and in secret, it made him happy. At first, Ju-won was confused by her emotions towards Sanha, but she slowly began to realize that every time she was near him, her heart would race. One day, while shopping, Mr. Yoon ran into Miss Kong. They exchanged a few words, and she revealed that she had opened a salon in the area a year ago. That was the reason they had the chance to meet. Mr. Yoon immediately understood that Miss Kong had done this just so she could secretly see Hae-jun, even if from a distance. Eventually, Mr. Yoon advised Miss Kong to meet her son in person, as Hae-jun deeply missed her. Now that he had returned from America and had quit basketball due to an injury, it was the perfect time for them to reunite. However, despite Mr. Yoon's encouragement, Hae-jun's mother refused to meet him. After some persuasion, Miss Kong finally confessed that in the past, she had caused someone's death. Because of this, she felt unworthy of seeing Hae-jun again. She was overwhelmed with guilt for abandoning him for so long and feared that her actions would bring shame to him as the child of a criminal. To her, simply watching Hae-jun from afar was enough. It was her way of keeping a distance, so she wouldn't burden his life. That night, Ju-won asked Sanha to talk. She firmly told him once again that she would not give him a chance and that, to her, he would always be nothing more than a brother. As they walked home through the pouring rain, their conversation lingered in Ju-won's mind. Seeking shelter, Sanha noticed how Ju-won avoided meeting his eyes. Though she kept insisting that their relationship was nothing more than that of siblings, her actions told a different story. Sensing an opportunity he might never get again, Sanha bravely leaned in and kissed Ju-won. At last, Ju-won began to open her heart to him. Like any other couple, they started spending more time together, though they kept their relationship a secret, waiting until they were ready to tell their families. Meanwhile, Hae-jun approached Mr. Yoon with a surprising proposal. He wanted to buy him a building. He explained that he had earned the money through years of hard work, first as a waiter and later as a successful model. However, instead of being touched, Mr. Yoon grew upset, feeling as though Hae-jun was trying to repay a debt rather than simply expressing gratitude. Their disagreement escalated into an argument. News of their quarrel quickly spread, reaching Mr. Kim and the restaurant's customers. They urged Mr. Yoon to reconsider, reminding him that as a father, he should be proud of his son's success. After much thought, Mr. Yoon softened. When Mr. Kim showed him photos of Hae-jun as a model, a sense of pride welled up in him. To show his support, he even displayed a framed picture of Hae-jun outside the restaurant, letting the world see that his son had made something of himself. Seeing this, Hae-jun was elated, feeling acknowledged and appreciated at last. However, his joy was short-lived. A message from his aunt shattered his moment of happiness. His mother had been living nearby all along, but had never attempted to see him. This realization left him heartbroken. He couldn't help but wonder if she truly wanted nothing to do with him, as if he were a burden. On the other side of town, Ju-won grew anxious after not hearing from Sanha all day. When she finally returned home, she found him lying in bed, burning with fever. Without hesitation, she tended to him with unwavering care, and thanks to her attention, he recovered swiftly. Later, they planned a date together, eager to enjoy each other's company. However, their outing took an unexpected turn when they stumbled upon Hae-jun, looking visibly distressed. Hae-jun confided in them, revealing that his mother owned a salon nearby, yet had made no effort to see him. He couldn't bring himself to approach her if she refused to acknowledge his existence. Determined to help, Ju-won and Sanha took matters into their own hands, deciding to visit Miss Kong's mother and urge her to meet with her son. When they arrived at the salon, they found Mr. Yoon already there, engaged in conversation with Miss Kong. After learning more about her situation, Ju-won didn't hold back. She bluntly told Hae-jun's mother that she was being selfish. She had never considered how her absence had affected Hae-jun. Ever since she stopped reaching out to him, he had been left feeling abandoned, burdened by rumors and whispers from others about his circumstances. Meanwhile, back at home, Hae-jun anxiously awaited Sanha's return. To his surprise, Miss Kwon and So-hee arrived instead, urging Sanha to come home. After waiting for what felt like an eternity, Sanha finally walked through the door with Ju-won by his side. But the reunion was far from joyful. His mother insisted that he return with her, but Sanha refused. He was determined to stay in this place, where he had found a true sense of belonging. The argument quickly escalated, and in the end, unable to face Ju-won with his sorrow, Sanha chose to leave for the hospital instead, hoping to find solace away from prying eyes. The next day, Ju-won grew anxious when Sanha left without a word. Worried, she went to the hospital, bringing along a change of clothes for him. When they met, Ju-won's presence seemed to ease Sanha's troubled mind, lifting his burdens. As they talked, Ju-won asked about Miss Kwon's visit, and Sanha reassured her that he had no plans to leave. Ju-won, now more mature, told him that she was not the same as before. In the past, she would plead with him not to go, but now, she was ready to accept whatever decision he made. However, once again, Sanha begged her not to let him go, even if he were to change his mind in the future. Tensions rose again when So-hee arrived at the hospital. She brought news that their mother had locked herself in her room, crying nonstop. So-hee pleaded with Sanha to come home, at least until she finished school. But Sanha refused, believing that his presence only hindered their mother's recovery. He had learned from the doctor that their mother was suffering from a mental condition affecting her physical health. Miss Kwon's emotional dependence on him was the root cause of her distress. Meanwhile, at Ju-won's shop, Hui-ju and Junho stopped by. They talked about visiting Sanha and felt sympathy for him. Ever since they had known him, he rarely smiled unless he was with Ju-won. At that moment, Hui-ju recalled their school days when Sanha's mood would instantly lift upon seeing Ju-won. no matter how downcast he had been before. Watching their recent encounter had reminded her of that, as Sanha had brightened up the moment he saw Juwon, despite having been so withdrawn before. This realization made Juwon uneasy, as Sanha had never openly expressed his struggles to her. Not long after, Ms. Kwan arrived, asking Sanha to stay with her for a few days. Though reluctant, he eventually agreed. However, at the same time, Juwon was waiting for him to return home. This led to yet another argument. Ms. Kwan accused Sanha of abandoning her in her fragile state, and her stubborn nature only escalated the conflict. This time, Juwon stepped in. She defended Sanha, reminding his mother of a promise she had made in the past, that Juwon could have Sanha. Juwon hoped that promise still held true. Then, she took Sanha away with her. The following morning, still worried after not hearing from Sanha, Juwon decided to visit him. When she arrived, she found him asleep in the living room alongside Haejun. The moment he saw Juwon, Sanha immediately pulled her into a tight embrace, as if nothing else in the world mattered. Their bond grew even stronger. That afternoon, the three of them spent time together, following a family tradition, and gradually, the weight on Sanha's heart lifted. With his mother back in Seoul, he finally felt at peace. They were reunited once more, just like in their high school days. Meanwhile, Haejun also felt relieved that Sanha's troubles had settled. However, deep inside, he still longed for his mother. Hearing this, Sanha decided to help. He tried to persuade Ms. Kong to speak with her son, telling her that all Haejun wanted was honesty, to know that he had never truly been abandoned and that his mother had always loved him. That was all he needed because, for so long, he had carried the painful belief that he was a burden to her. Meanwhile, Haejun was spending time with his friends but grew frustrated as they openly displayed affection in front of him. His irritation stemmed from witnessing Sanha and Juwon being affectionate earlier that morning, though he was unsure whether it had been real or just a dream. However, a shocking moment occurred when Haejun entered Juwon's apartment to grab some drinks, only to see Juwon and Sanha sharing another intimate moment. Overcome with anger, Haejun felt abandoned and feared being left behind, much like how couples tend to distance themselves from friends once they are in a relationship. Although Juwon and Sanha tried to explain, Haejun stubbornly opposed their relationship. He believed that if they were to date and eventually marry, they would forget about him entirely. Exhausted by Haejun's narrow-mindedness, Sanha finally told him to think whatever he wanted and walked away. Sanha hoped Haejun would broaden his perspective and stop underestimating the deep familial bond they had built together over the years. Amid his sadness and loneliness after the argument, Haejun found comfort in Park Dao, who always stayed by his side and offered support as a loyal friend. On the other hand, Juwon refused to give up on Haejun. She made a persistent effort to reach out to him, trying to ease his anger and seek his approval for her relationship with Sanha. Though her efforts didn't have an immediate effect, once Haejun calmed down, he finally agreed to discuss things with them. However, he imposed several conditions if Sanha wanted to date Juwon. Initially, Sanha resisted these demands, finding them burdensome, but after reconsidering, he decided to persuade Haejun. In the end, Haejun reluctantly gave his blessing to their relationship. Not long after, Haejun made up his mind to face a much bigger issue, his mother. For years, he had frequently visited Ms. Kong, but she had always refused to see him, showing no intention of reuniting. However, this time, Haejun gathered all his courage and confronted her, pouring out all his emotions. He told Ms. Kong that this would be his final visit and that he would never return, choosing instead to consider her as if she no longer existed. His words undoubtedly hurt his mother, yet she still refrained from offering any explanation. News of Haejun's encounter with his mother quickly spread, causing concern among his family and friends. Of all people, he confided in Park Dao, who was not only his close friend, but also Juwon's close friend. Park Dao had heard that Haejun's mother had left for Seoul to settle a debt, but ended up in an accident, and was imprisoned by the victim's family, though she was eventually released. Drawing from her experience as a lawyer, Park Dao used a similar case as an analogy to help Hae-jun understand his mother's situation. Realizing the true meaning behind Park Dao's words, Hae-jun began to comprehend why his mother had avoided him all this time. Finally, Hae-jun gathered his courage and decided to meet Miss Kong once more. This time, she was ready to tell him everything. After exchanging stories and feelings, they finally came to understand one another. Mr. Yoon then invited everyone, including Miss Kong, to a family gathering. The warmth of family filled their hearts once again. The burdens weighing on Hae-jun's mind and heart began to lift. He started spending more time with Park Dao as he felt comfortable around her. One day, as their bond grew stronger, Park Dao confessed her feelings to Hae-jun. However, overwhelmed by shyness, she ran away before he could respond. This news delighted Ju-won, who wholeheartedly supported her. Ju-won even asked Hae-jun how he felt about Park Dao, but he refused to let her interfere in his affairs. The following day, the entire family gathered for a meal. In the midst of light-hearted conversation, the elders suggested that Sanha and Ju-won start thinking about finding partners, considering their age. Seizing the moment, Sanha mustered the courage to reveal the truth. With confidence, he announced that he already had a girlfriend, and that girlfriend was Ju-won. The revelation took everyone by surprise. While Mr. Kim expressed his support, Mr. Yoon strongly opposed the relationship. When Mr. Kim asked the reason, Mr. Yoon explained that no relationship is free from challenges. He feared that if Sanha and Ju-won ever broke up, the family bond they had built over nearly 20 years would crumble. Not only that, he also worried that, in the event of a conflict, he would be unable to choose sides, as he saw them both as his own children. His deep fear of losing family harmony made it difficult for him to give his blessing. Ju-won tried to persuade her father. Carefully, she asked what they could do to earn his approval. However, her father remained silent. Sanha also attempted to talk to Mr. Yoon, only to be met with scolding. Mr. Yoon questioned why Sanha hadn't considered the possibility that his relationship with Ju-won might jeopardize their family ties. He even pointed out that as someone intelligent and forward-thinking, Sanha should have suppressed his feelings for the sake of the family. Despite this, Sanha calmly promised that he would never make Ju-won cry or suffer because of him. Not long after, an incident occurred. While trying to surprise Ju-won, Sanha accidentally fell and injured himself. He was quickly taken to the hospital for minor treatment. Despite his lingering anger toward them, Mr. Yoon couldn't hide his concern when he heard about Sanha's injury. Meanwhile, Hae-jun, who had been spending more time with Miss Kong, began inviting her to live with him. Additionally, Hae-jun decided to meet Park Dao and finally respond to her confession. With a heavy heart, he turned her down. News of Hae-jun rejecting Park Dao quickly spread, even reaching his close friends. One of them teasingly remarked on how unfortunate Park Dao was. After mustering the courage to confess her feelings in front of everyone, she was coldly rejected by Hae-jun. This made Hae-jun feel a twinge of regret. He started imagining how humiliating it must have been for Park Dao and wondered how he would have felt in her place. Meanwhile, another issue arose when Miss Kwon visited Ju-won's shop. She had discovered that Sanha had been determined to return to this town because of Ju-won. Moreover, Sanha had recently asked for permission to date Ju-won. Unfortunately, Miss Kwon firmly demanded that Ju-won end their relationship. She even threatened that she would never interfere in Sanha's life again, as long as he and Ju-won broke up. This threat weighed heavily on Ju-won's mind. She didn't want Sanha to continue suffering under his mother's influence. After speaking and receiving advice from her father, Ju-won felt more certain about her decision. She realized that no matter what happened, she wanted to stay with Sanha. Both Sanha and Ju-won had already made up their minds. They were determined to love each other despite any obstacles that stood in their way. In the end, after Sanha persistently tried to convince Mr. Yoon, Ju-won's father finally softened and gave his blessing to their relationship. Meanwhile, Hae-jun accidentally saw Park-dal with another man. It turned out that the man was someone she had been set up with on a blind date arranged by her mother. Without Hae-jun's knowledge, Park-dal had been pressured by her mother to find a partner as soon as possible. Ju-won even joked that perhaps Park-dal had agreed to go on the blind date because Hae-jun had rejected her. Seeing Park-dal with another man made Hae-jun feel jealous. That feeling made him realize his true emotions toward her. After careful thought, Hae-jun finally decided to take a bold step and ask Park-dal to be in a relationship with him. In the end, both Hae-jun and San-ha had found their respective partners, making their happiness feel even more complete. However, there was one last plan they wanted to bring to life: matchmaking Hae-jun's mother with Mr. Yoon. At first, Ms. Kong rejected the idea. She recalled how, when Ju-won was a child, she had refused to accept her as a new mother. But this time was different. Ju-won had grown up and prioritized her father's happiness. She knew that her father had feelings for Ms. Kong, so she sincerely encouraged her, expressing her true desire for her to marry her father. Feeling accepted by Ju-won, Ms. Kong finally gathered the courage to meet Mr. Yoon. Face to face, she expressed her wish to become his life partner. And finally, the long-awaited moment arrived. Mr. Yoon married Ms. Kong, officially uniting their families. Now, Ju-won and Hae-jun had truly become siblings. Their big family was finally complete, bound even closer together by the love and connection they had built over the years. Moral lesson from the story: if you're going to avoid someone for 5 years, make sure your excuse is better than "I was busy," or they'll think you're a stranger. Also, if you're secretly in love, don't wait until they're about to date someone else to confess. Timing is everything, and so is ice cream.